I'm gonna start by saying thank you. Thank you for your life's work.
Oh, thank you. Great to be here.
And then I'm gonna turn to somebody who is not grateful for your life's work, President. And like many good days, President Trump gave us a tweet over the weekend that's perfect for us, where he tweeted, 46% of people believe major national news organizations make up stories about me. Now, that same pollster also polled people, and only 32% of Americans believe that the president tells the truth. But the reality is we are living in a time when the administration is telling the American people day in, day out, don't trust the press. What do you do with that?
Well, look, I mean, you have a president who day in and day out, practically every day, is saying that we're fake news. And that has an effect. I mean, that's essentially propaganda. You repeat it over and over and over, and it has an effect. But we have to keep doing our jobs every day. I mean, we have a newsroom of 750 people. We don't need 750 people to make up stuff, I can tell you that. They're out there doing their jobs every day, trying to report. And a lot of what the president has called fake news, essentially, that's anything that doesn't conform to his account of events. He has said on repeated occasions that if there's an anonymous source, then there is no source. And yet, at the same time, he's launched a record number of leak investigations, according to his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. And why do you have a leak investigation? In order to have a leak investigation, there has to be a source and it has to be true. And they're conducting a record number of leak investigations. So if this is fake news, what exactly are they investigating? We've been here before. I mean,
When?
Well, during Watergate, as a matter of fact. I'm not making a comparison here. People can make their own judgments about that. But, the press has been held in low esteem. It's been declining over the years. It's interesting. We've been declining, like approval ratings for all institutions have been declining. Interestingly, the confidence in the presidency has declined very sharply over the last year, to the point where the confidence in the presidency is about at the level of confidence in the press. So in some sense, the president is bringing us closer together. So, during Watergate, it was viewed as a partisan investigation by the press. Our approval ratings were exceptionally low. And then it turned out that reporting was validated at the end. And the President Nixon had to resign, and approval ratings for the press shot up, probably to the highest level we'll ever see, which is probably in the mid-50s, because somebody is always upset with us for one reason or another. But the reporting was validated, and I'm absolutely confident that the reporting we're doing today will be validated over the long run, and I take the long view.
You and Governor Kasich seem to have the same message, that goodness will prevail, but you have to play the long game. But in the meantime, you lead a newsroom of 750 people. How do you keep them motivated? I mean, the day in, day out Trump fatigue, not just even with the greatest reporting, you've got the administration that's claiming it's fake news, but just the constant slot of information out there. How do you keep your teams going through this? I can say, I'm exhausted, I'm depressed by it.
Oh, I'm not depressed. I'm sorry for your depression, but
I'm tired of it.
I'm not depressed at all. In fact, I think people in our newsroom are more animated, more motivated than they've been in a long time. They feel that they play a very important role in covering this government and covering our politicians and our policymakers. And what we're hearing from the American public, notwithstanding polls like that, what we're seeing in our subscriptions, what we're seeing in terms of traffic to our sites, all of that, we're seeing that people have begun to appreciate the role of the press in a democracy in a way that they have not in a very, very long time. For so long, the American public has taken the press for granted. They haven't really understood our role in the democracy. They didn't really support us. Now what we're seeing is a huge increase in subscriptions, for example, to the Washington Post, because they want to support quality journalism. They're concerned about people who are spreading absolute falsehoods. They're concerned about people who are trafficking in crackpot conspiracy theories. And they know that if they don't actually support quality journalism, there will be no quality journalism.
Quality journalism takes a lot of money, and it takes patience. How do you even keep your talent inside the building motivated and on that path? Right now, for a young journalist, It's exciting to get loads of attention. It's exciting to have a story that's out there with a wild headline that works. You know, Governor Kasich was saying on TV, if you say something that far out there, everyone loves it. But the way you run your business about in regard to long-term good, not being the hottest, flashiest story this second.
Look, you know what has turned around our business, and our business certainly at the Washington Post has turned around dramatically, and that is subscriptions. People actually buying a subscription, putting their hand in their pocket and actually giving us money because they support the kind of work we're doing. And what do those subscribers want? They want investigative reporting, which takes a lot of money and a lot of resources. So we now know that there is a business model for investigative reporting. They want strong narrative pieces. They want explanatory journalism. All of the kind of work that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of money, and that is really what they want. And that's what we're pushing is we're really trying to get more subscribers. It's not just a matter of how many clicks you get. It's not a matter of clickbait or anything like that. It's a matter of getting people to feel attachment to you. For us, it was getting more people to read us, so adoption. Then it was getting people to be really attached to the work that we did. So they were becoming kind of addicted to reading the Washington Post, which was great. And now that they're subscribing, we're aiming for affection. Which is harder, and that is when they read us, they feel very satisfied with what they're getting day in and day out.
Now that your subscriptions are up, what does the demographic look like of those new readers? I can remember during the campaign, I went and I spent a night at a university, and I asked all the students where they get their news from. And they said to me, we get our news from Twitter. And I said, where on Twitter? And they couldn't really articulate when they clicked through where they were getting it from. And the dangers there are extraordinary because, you know, I would actually have them pull up the name from a story, and a lot of these conspiracy theory type, far to the right, far to the left news organizations have pretty safe names, but what they represent and the poor journalistic standards are scary. So what do your new readers look like, and how do you teach the next generation of people to care about quality news and what quality news looks like?
Well, I mean, I think that's a real concern. I think people generally, particularly young people, have no idea where their news is coming from. They are getting it from Google News or Google Search, or they're getting it from Twitter, or they're getting it on Facebook, something like that. And they can't recall exactly where that came from or how they got it, or whether that's an institution that has any credibility whatsoever. But what we're seeing is, in terms of overall traffic, about a third of our readers are millennials, which is incredible, which is fantastic. And among subscribers, our fastest growth is among millennials. So we even find younger people who are now realize that they should, I mean, because they pay for other things, they pay for Netflix and things like that, that the fastest growth we have is among the millennials subscribing to our organization. And I know that there are other organizations that are seeing the same thing.
People think that President Trump does a huge amount of media because he puts a huge amount of information out there. You know, Twitter has become the perfect vehicle for the president to get his message out because he doesn't actually have to answer any questions. And he really does, for the most part, only administration-friendly media, so there's not much pushback. Can you compare that to previous administrations? Because oftentimes in our minds, we think that President Obama did quite a bit of press, but he actually didn't either.
He really didn't, you know. I mean, we at the Washington Post, I don't think we had an interview, a one-on-one interview with him from his second year in office. Over the final 2 years of his administration, we tried over and over and over again to get an interview with him, and he declined. You know, he gave it to the guy with Between Two Ferns. He gave it to his former campaign chairman or strategist, David Axelrod, who has a podcast. He gave it to BuzzFeed. He gave it to other outfits, basically organizations that he saw as very much in line with his ideology, and that I don't think that he viewed as being entirely independent. So this notion of a president actually turning to media that he views as very much aligned with his politics is not a new thing. And Trump is doing that maybe to an even greater degree.
And how do you combat that? I mean, you at the Washington Post have a team of fact checkers.
Well, we have two fact checkers actually. We doubled the size, so we had two, but that was even before the Trump administration. But I can tell you that the fact checkers have never been busier. We actually calculated after 9 months in office that the president had made more than 1,300 false or misleading statements just in his first 9 months in office. And so I guess, when he talks about fake news, he knows what he's talking about. So this is, we have, look, as far as having access to the president, obviously we need some level of access to people in the administration, and we have that. We have a professional relationship with people in the Trump administration. I'm glad to say that's as it should be. But at the same time, we don't depend on access. There are other places to go. There are other people to talk to. There is a whole world to talk to out there. And we don't have to depend on getting an interview with the president in order to do our jobs.
You mentioned a record number of leak investigations. Can you talk for a moment about the importance of independent free press, and is it at risk right now?
Well, I hope it's not at risk. I worry about it because we have a president who's constantly attacking that. He believes that...
And how worried are you about that?
How worried am I about it?
Yeah, when he's talking to Erdogan, he's going, right on, you got this press thing figured out. That's scary.
Right. Look at what's happening around the world. Look what's happening in Turkey with Erdogan. Look what's happening in Venezuela with Maduro. Look what's happening in Hungary now. What's beginning to happen in Poland. What's happening in so many other...
Here with
and what's
Jeff
happening...
Sessions.
Sure. And so I think that there have been attacks. I think that there is a determined effort to try to undermine the press in this country. The administration is starting from an advantage. That there are something like 30, the latest polls show that something like 38% of the American public cannot name a single right provided to them in the First Amendment. Not one right. Not free speech, not free press, not freedom to assemble, not freedom to petition the government for redress of grievances, and not even freedom of religion. They can't name a single right in the First Amendment. What's that?
I'm guessing those people are not on your new subscriber
They're probably
list.
not subscribing, but they should. So, I think that is a concern. There has always been, there is the base of support for the First Amendment for freedom of expression is too weak. And by the way, it doesn't just come from the right, it comes from the left too, which wants to constrain free speech in so many different ways.
All right, I want to stay on that for a moment because the left and free speech, in some ways, we are turning the likes of Ann Coulter into free speech martyrs. When we talk about college campuses that have become such extraordinarily safe spaces, is that hurting us?
Well, I believe in free speech, and I believe you counter free speech with more free speech.
But what about
I just don't believe in putting
there?
You know what? There's a book. Anthony Lewis wrote a book called Freedom for the Speech We Hate, all right? And it was a book about the First Amendment. And where did he get that phrase? He got that from a Supreme Court justice who included it in one of his opinions, is that our Constitution does provide for all sorts of speech, including for speech that we hate. And the best way to counter that speech is not by shutting it off, but is by making an argument against it.
But by allowing extreme speech to exist, are we empowering it and enabling it?
Well, what's extreme? What one government would say is extreme. They might say that what we say on our editorial pages, which I, by the way, am not responsible for. I have nothing to do with our editorial pages. I am responsible for our news coverage. But, this government might say that what we're saying on our editorial pages constitutes hate speech and extreme speech and unpatriotic speech. They've called it that. And so where do we want to go?
Anything against the administration could be construed as unpatriotic?
They've basically argued that a lot of what we have done, even the reporting that we've done, is fundamentally unpatriotic. And just the other day, the White House press spokesperson said that we shouldn't even be, essentially suggested it was inappropriate for us to even question
John Kelly, a
4-star general, because he's a 4-star general. Now that's preposterous. The theme here is we the people. We the people should have the right to question anybody who represents us.
Well, President Jimmy Carter just yesterday said he believes the press has been harder on President Trump than any previous administration. Would you agree?
Not really, no. I don't know
He
what
just gives
measurement.
us so much material?
Huh?
He just gives us
Well,
something to go after.
he has certainly provided us with material. That's true. I mean, look, if he's making one false statement after the next, I think that it's our obligation to report that those are false statements. And it's not I didn't cause him to make those statements. He just made them right on his own. And so we have to do our job, and really, if they're not true, then we have to say that they're not true. I don't know on what basis the former president says that.
Then what is the job right now of the press, or how challenging is it for you to keep your people understanding what the mission is? Because right now, and we mentioned it earlier, but in an age where whether you're talking about print journalists or TV journalists, because of social media, reporters can become more influential on their own than the organization. A few years ago, if people on your team wrote things that were not fit to print, you wouldn't print it. But now, with the infinite amount of outlets out there, they can go out the door. They can go elsewhere.
They can, and they have, as a matter of fact. That's just the nature of things. It's a free market for people, and there's now a lot of competition for talented people. I am concerned mostly about social media and what people do on social media. There people feel less constrained in what they feel free to say. We want the public to understand that we are real people. We're human beings. We have personalities. We're not just a faceless institution. And so social media helps us accomplish that. But sometimes that leads people on our staff to say things that they probably shouldn't say. And fortunately, it doesn't happen that often, but it has happened from time to time. Certainly, other organizations have had to deal with that recently.
Social media, is it good or bad from a press perspective, from your perspective?
My view is it is, so we just deal with it. I think that it helps us disseminate our work to far more people than we were ever able to before. People can share our work. A huge number of people are reading us because their friends showed them a story that we wrote. I like that aspect of it. I do think that it has a downside, though, of course, and that is that it's facilitated a polarization in the consumption of media. So people are only getting information that affirms their pre-existing point of view, and it's not just opinion now. It's what purports to be information, what purport to be facts, which in fact, in many instances, are absolute falsehoods or crazy conspiracy theories.
Then what do we
and they are
do about
receptive
that?
to those.
What do we do? I mean, if you look at your mother, your sister, a friend, their Facebook page, people who you know and respect, you'll be shocked to see the stories that they're out there promoting from organizations that have zero fact in there.
Right.
What's to be done about that?
I was hoping you could help, but I don't know the answer to that. But I'm hoping that Google can help to some degree on that front, as well as Facebook and Twitter and all of the other companies out there. I mean, obviously, I do think that we need education in news literacy in this country. I'm involved to some degree in an organization that's trying to promote news literacy around the country to make sure that individuals are more sophisticated consumers of information that they know.
But that's the opposite of what you say. More sophisticated consumers, and a portion of this country spits out the window at even the notion of that.
Yeah, well, there are people. I think you have to have these programs in middle school and high school. You have to allow people to, if they're going to be sophisticated consumers of their cars and their computers, they should be sophisticated consumers of their media as well. And they need to know what kinds of questions to ask. They need some basis for comparison.
Then is the elite liberal media a fair label? Because I scratch my head at it, because when you walk into a newsroom and you see what the majority of beat journalists get paid, how hard they work, and what their lifestyles are, there's nothing elite about it. Yet when you go out on the trail, I mean, last weekend, I watched Steve Bannon at the Values Voters Summit talk about the liberal elite media, and while inside I'm laughing going, is this a former Goldman MD who's financed by Renaissance, the hedge fund, screaming about the liberal media elite? That seems pretty elitist, but again, we can't seem to shake this label.
Right. I mean, the people who are making those accusations most regularly, or leading those accusations, are people who are billionaires who are accusing us of being elite. Okay, so I mean, we're really in an extraordinary time that way. I mean, the fact is that the people who are part of our newsroom, they come from all over the country. They come from Ohio. We have people from Ohio University, Ohio State, lots of people actually within our newsroom who come from there. We have a deputy national editor who grew up on a farm in western Pennsylvania. Her brother still runs the farm. We have vets who are in our newsroom as well.
Then why doesn't the country see that? Why don't they know that?
Well, we need to tell people more about who we are, and actually Google is helping to, thankfully, is helping to facilitate a process where we actually disclose more about who we are, so that when you see a byline on a story, you'll be able to have a pull-down window that will offer a full biography. It'll talk a little more about people's expertise, what their experience is, things like that. That will be a sort of a signal for, presumably a signal for trust, and it would be great, by the way, Google, if we actually got higher search results as a consequence of that. So think about that. So that is what, we're willing to provide that information. We're willing to be more transparent. We need to be more transparent about how we go about our work, who we've interviewed, who we are. Well, here are the original documents. Take a look at this. Don't just take our word for it. Listen to the audio of the interview. Things like that. We clearly need to be more transparent about how we go about our work and about who we are. And I was saying about people on our staff. We have a staffer. One of the people who covers healthcare for us. She came from a family of 12 kids. She was homeschooled. She went to an evangelical Christian college. Her roommate works for us also. She covers religion. We have a lot of different people in our newsroom, and people make entirely false assumptions about who we are and where we come from.
Then give us a quick history lesson in terms of every day we say, these are unprecedented times, unprecedented. Is that true?
Well, I think it's gone to an extreme that I don't know that I've seen in my lifetime. I mean, I do think back on Nixon and his vice president, Spiro Agnew, who was the attack dog for that administration, going after the press. You may recall that he loved alliteration, so he said nattering nabobs of negativism. He said the helpless hysterics of hypochondriacs of history. It wasn't elegant, I got to say, but it was alliterative. So he said that newspapers disposed of their garbage by printing it, which was so he thought it was funny. It's kind of funny, but in any event, he was there attacking us day in and day out, and ultimately he had to resign of his own scandal. But it was still a very hostile environment for the press at the time. I didn't experience it so much because at all, actually. I was in high school and college during that period of time.
How hostile is it now?
I think that there's a public hostility. I mean, as I was saying, our own relationship with people in the administration is professional. We have good relationships. We are able to communicate. That's the way that it ought to be. I think that's entirely positive. But in terms of the public statements, it's a very hostile environment, no question about it.
Quick before we go, I just wanted to ask, the president likes to go after Amazon because he believes Amazon owns the Washington Post, and he doesn't often like what the Washington Post writes. And while you're not owned by Amazon, you are by Jeff Bezos. How has that changed the life of the Washington Post?
Well, it's been a positive for us. I mean, Jeff changed our strategy. He reoriented us to becoming a national news organization. He has invested not just financial capital, which everybody seems to focus on, but intellectual capital in our success. He does not get involved in our coverage decisions at all. He doesn't tell us what to write. He doesn't complain about what we've written.
Does he get complaints?
Probably, but he doesn't pass them on to me. So, what he gets involved in are our tactics and our strategies, and that's great. And what he wants us to do is to create a sustainable business model for quality journalism. He doesn't treat us like a charity. I'm very glad that he doesn't treat us like a charity, because if he ever got tired of the charity, we would be in deep trouble. And so what we really need is, we don't need charity, we need to have a sustainable business model. And it's not just us, by the way. It needs to apply to local news organizations, particularly local news organizations with a newspaper heritage. That's where the real crisis in journalism is today. And that continues to be a struggle, is to come up with a sustainable business model for local journalism.
Marty, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.